My name is Caitlin Kavanagh and I'm a product marketer here at Revenera. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on flexibility meets scalability, why dev teams are moving to InstallShield CLS. I'm joined by Crispin Luxton, the co-founder of TLux, and Rob Neff, Director of Global Inside Sales at Revenera. Today, they're going to be discussing what CLS or Cloud License Server is, and why it's a game changer for cloud adoption, the key differences between on-prem and CLS, and best practices for managing a CLS successfully, with some real-world case studies showcasing its impact. Well, that's it for me. So over to you, Crispin and Rob.
Excellent. Thank you, Caitlin. So just a quick hello from me. You've probably seen me in some webinars from Revenera and Flexera before. So my name is Crispin. I run a company called TLux Technologies based out of here in the UK. We actually operate globally, and we've been for over 10 years now Revenera's global partner for training and consulting in many technologies. And really what gives us that license is actually I used to work for Revenera. So, you're in good hands, and Rob and I have worked together a long time. So we hope you find this discussion very, very informative. Really, you can see on that quick update there, we work across the broad spectrum of products from Revenera, and that's really why we're here today. So I think before we start discussing the ins and outs, the pros and cons, the trends, the advantages, the disadvantages, the real-world examples, the gotchas, the best practice, we need to talk about what is a cloud license server, because we need to define this properly, and we need to make sure everyone's clear. And long story short, this is a cloud-based service from Revenera, which helps you bring into the modern world a much more efficient and optimized way for server management, really for removing the need for local license management, to harmonize and kind of bring together all your license operations into one place, but at the same time, give you the opportunity to streamline your DevOps, bring flexibility, but also add the need for change within the business, because any business will change over the years. Licensing needs change, product needs change, right? And the market changes. And then if we add into that the concept around the different cloud providers that have evolved over the last 5 years only, the cloud providers we were speaking about 5 years ago are very different to today. Google wasn't the big player, it's now number 2. With the CLS, you can combine the management of on-prem and cloud-based needs, again, to help you move from an on-prem system to a cloud-based system, but not just in one switch. It's never going to be one switch off and on. It's not binary. So really that's what the CLS does. It will support Azure, it will support Amazon AWS and the Google Cloud Platform in any blend that you need. But very importantly, I think this is really practical, we see this in our clients, you do retain legacy support, right? It's a legacy for non-cloud workflows, because you'll have invested a lot of effort, a lot of time in making those productive. So that, again, coming from the TLux perspective as an independent, third-party technology business, we operate inside the engine room of a lot of businesses. And really, this was developed by Revenera to help people build machines into the cloud. Rob, any insight from inside Revenera, right? You're the guy on the inside, I know this was developed to help the InstallShield clients, and I think it's and we're going to probably mention it later, but it's in addition to certain InstallShield versions, right? It's not a replacement for anything, right? That's probably a fair comment.
Absolutely, Crispin. Usually that use case is companies don't want to take the time to upgrade every single installer. And so there may be instances where they just need to make a minor change, maybe a registry entry, new desktop shortcut, something like that. They're not going to go through the time and effort, the Q&A to go and actually upgrade that entire project to a current release. So some of the older products kind of stay where they are, maybe in a more of a heritage standpoint. When they have the need for new products, or maybe key products that do need new features, new functionalities, that's at what point they would take advantage of maybe a cloud license server or a different technology available in the marketplace.
Right. And also, there's security considerations, right? Keeping servers updated. What Revenera is going to do is help take over that for you, right? Reduce your need to manage all these things in the practical world.
great point. And to be clear, all that Revenera is involved in with a hosting is the check-in and check-out process. There's no access to data, no access to projects, information of that nature. We're merely facilitating the check-in, check-out process, eliminating the need for physical machines and maintaining those physical machines for our customers. So it definitely has that advantage.
So no maintenance really for the kind of new clients, no security patching headaches, with all the kind of all the headaches we know the DevOps guys have as well today, right? We're trying to remove them from that situation.
That's right. Most of those customers are already managing multiple license servers for other tools that they use in a concurrent model. So just one more license server to manage might seem trivial, but for a lot of customers, that could be the break point. So there's a relief when they hear they don't need to manage this solution internally.
And I think the last thing I'll mention on this is, as T-Lux, we work a lot with software vendors, right? We help them get their installers in good order to throw them over the fence to the enterprises, who we also work with, right? Tell them, be like yourselves at Revenera and Flexera on the two sides. And what we find is that they really, it's quite lumpy the way they do these kind of projects, right? So a product might have 4 releases a year, right? Once a quarter. There might be some hot fixes and patches in between, and we'll maybe talk about those on another day. But whatever the project needs are, they're quite acute when there's a software release being developed. It's developed, it's rolled out, it's done, and then it kind of calms down again. So what we find is that anything that makes that really acute activity of doing a software release and licensing and checkouts and tweaks, like you said, it might be a registry key, but that registry key could be a hash algorithm to an encryption key for a dongle, without which your £100,000 engineering software isn't going to work, right? So we might be sitting there thinking, oh, it's pretty trivial. But, we've all worked in situations where, software is king, right? Whether you're a hardware manufacturer, whether you're a software manufacturer, we go to hospitals, we have scans on these big alien-looking scanners. Guess what? There's software in them, right? So yeah, I think it's really acute the way this migration is really helping those kind of releases. So, and we see that in the market. We really do. So I think let's talk a little bit more on this next slide about how it's different to the way they work today, how a client would work today. The CLS, as we said, right, Rob, it's alongside a Premier license, a concurrent license. It's not a replacement for it. It's a veneer of control. Would it be fair to say it's a veneer of automation, or would that be going too far?
Well, I could definitely see the automation setup when you look at build environments, whether they're static or dynamic virtualized. There's definitely a need to automate that build process, not even the deployment, but just maybe even a sanity check. Some customers want to build on specific OSs so they can replicate what an installation experience will be like for their customers.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think that's a stretch at all to say that it would extend to build environments and automation.
It's one of the buzzwords of today, right? Everyone's trying to automate everything. And again, in our world, we sometimes have to help clients put the brakes on that excitement, right? Because whilst automation is fantastic, it's also the quickest route to chaos and disaster if it's not well planned.
Yeah, well, you get that set it and forget it with automation, and if you forget it, you might not realize that when you decommission a server, what other utilities or tools are being used that do create major impacts. So that's definitely a concern where customers are trying to figure out, how do I make sure I don't miss the bigger picture? So automation can help, but it can also hurt.
Right, exactly. In fact, we've got a client up in Norway. They make marine engineering products. Let's leave it there. They've got hundreds of SKUs. It's a really old company, over 100 years. It's not as simple to say, right, we're going to have 20 SKUs, right? They've got so many heritage clients. And they have the concept of fire and forget. That's literally what they say. They call it fire and forget. They want to fire a build out and forget about it.
Yep.
And they mean that in many levels. They mean it from a technical level, so InstallShield and the build and the process and the format. Am I signing this build? What kind of build format is it? They also talk about it in the operational side. So, on our slide here, we're talking about the fact that Revenera, whatever cloud system you use, freeing up your team, your people, to do what they're best at. And okay, big companies will have DevOps people, will have SysOps people, will have IT operations people, but more and more the expectations these systems are going to be managing themselves, and I think it's to that same kind of thread. And we touched on the point here on the bottom left actually earlier, is future proofing. So for example, this company we have, and I think we're going to go to some example use cases with you, Rob, in a short while. People won't go from A to B right straight away, whatever that A is, whatever that B is, and it's the same here. They won't. I mean, firstly, if you said to them, "Oh, it's dead easy," you're going to click, next, right, to use an InstallShield style. It's not that simple. But what we can do, I think, with the CLS is really streamline that. We can help handhold them through that transition to a cloud-based system. It's not big bang. Not every system will do that straight away. They might want to manage how that's done, right? And I think that's the message, isn't it? That this is a technology which will help them ease that path to a more future-proof system with the DevOps team.
Yeah, and that's not just with InstallShield as far as like a cloud license server, but also the question is, what cloud provider should we go with? Are we already a Microsoft shop? We're all in, and Azure is naturally what we're going to leverage, or as you said earlier, Crispin, Google is actually kind of stepping up in the ranks and now appearing as a number 2 provider. So that's what's really great about the Flexera solution, is that we do not need to pin you down to what cloud provider. So it's fully agnostic, and you can support Azure today and next month, next year, whatever your timeline may be. If you need to switch for whatever reason, you have that flexibility. So I think that helps future-proof that if you haven't figured who's going to be your all-in provider from a cloud standpoint, you don't need to make that decision before deciding whether or not making the leap to a cloud license server with the InstallShield solution makes sense.
And they can change that, like you're saying. I think that's not always that obvious in these kind of systems where, there's no question Azure is number 1, right? I think that's just through the kind of saturation of the Microsoft technologies. And if you're in a business looking to migrate to using the CLS, you might want to soften the impact, have a go for the low-hanging fruit of just adopting Azure, have a proof of concept, some quick wins to show your management or your team, hey, this can be a great thing. But actually, in 6, 12, 18 months time, if the business strategy is to go to the Google, solutions or AWS, for example, they can change that. It's not set in stone, right? So this can change as their business changes as well. And also, I guess, through M&A, right? That's another area that a lot of our businesses will see. They're inheriting products, legacy products they don't know a lot about, right? And suddenly you've got product Z, and there's a massive overhead in terms of management of it, right? I mean, like you guys probably see the same in Revenera that we see on the shop floor, so to speak.
Yeah, a funny example of that is something as simple as Teams versus Slack.
Right.
Well, you kind of have to do one or the other. You can't do both. Well, that's not a situation you would need to be in with your cloud provider, because InstallShield is going to support whatever cloud provider you go with. No additional charge, no real change on your end other than just obviously identifying where those instances are hosted for build machines. But that's kind of one of a bigger advantage point, is you have that ability to pivot or do an audible on the fly and be able to meet your customers' needs, which is ultimately what we're trying to solve here.
Yeah. And actually, a side effect of that is a reduction in capex, right? I mean, who doesn't love that? That's good for any business, and for all the benefits of traceability and reporting up the value chain, less stress around that, I guess, less, again, maintaining, less updating, less risk. I guess that's a bigger word as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, as the industry has changed, the world has changed with respect to virtual machines and how those are sold and licensed. This is creating questions amongst a lot of other software vendors and trying to figure out, well, how do we do that? And shifting to operating expenses seems to be a way to help, at least in the sense that you can pivot more easily should needs change years down the road, or even a quarter down the road. So it's something that we see a lot, and customers need to be able to reduce that expenditure on physical machines and dedicated servers that are going to act as a licensed server.
Yeah.
So it does kind of come full circle to not just, supporting your customers, but internally to the business and how to more efficiently and more effectively run the development operations and ultimately a software development lifecycle.
Yeah, and it mirrors the expectation nowadays that most software is sold as a SaaS model, right?
Very true. Very true.
You go back 15 years, 10 years, you'd go and buy a piece of software, you'd pay whatever it was for your license, and that was it for the year. Then you'd pay another year. Everything is at least has an option of a SaaS model now, a subscription, and it's very comfy. People are very comfy with it, and I think if people are more comfy, they're more likely to adopt it, and the business will see the benefit in that as a result.
Yeah, and I think this is where you see usage change, right? There's not really the old days of a 1-to-1 ratio of a power user that I do this all day, every day. You kind of see that shift to agile development, right? And Scrum teams and more of that all hands on deck. And you don't want to put all that knowledge and that dependency into a single human being. That could leave the company, right? Or something could happen where now you've lost all that tribal knowledge. So a lot of organizations,
we call it over here.
Yeah, right.
I'm
certain you're seeing a lot of that in your world, Crispin, where you've got customers that have had an installer that's been working, but they aren't the original author. So they try to figure out, well, what went into this? There's a team of us that are using this. So
it's classic. And, it can be built on a server that nobody actually knows where it is, right? It's kind of, well, we know it works. There's this automation script that does a magic build every week. It pulls in all the resources from my dev team, and everything's great until it's not great, And then I've literally had clients in the past where there was basically almost like a treasure hunt to find where this damn server was, so they could do an update on it. And until they did an update, they couldn't make a build. Until they made a build, they couldn't get the build out, and clients wouldn't get, it's an extreme example, but it's
and with the risk though, it's at that point it's too late. The negative consequences already happened. Your customer hasn't received their build.
Banging out the door, the digital door, right? Emails, inbox, where's our release, all this kind of stuff. And so I think it's about being proactive, isn't it? Having a solution around avoiding those things. I mean, it's all well and good to have a good, strategy to firefight, but we'd all prefer not to have to firefight in the first place.
That's right.
Yeah. Amazing. So some good differences. I think it's the classic blend, isn't it, Rob, of people, process, and technology, right? That we're kind of bringing into here.
Yeah, and also mentalities, right? Some don't want to. They don't want to rely on a single person or a single team. They want to be able to spread that knowledge across the organization, so that as they grow and if they are acquiring competitors or just complementary technologies, they're able to take advantage of that. They're able to integrate that organization and truly work as one team. So we really see that agile methodologies as a key theme, and a lot of companies moving towards that.
Yeah, definitely. More and more, definitely. Well, let's move on then just to look at some of the core business drivers of CLS adoption. And this is something that we see a lot. We've mentioned a couple of these already. It's this seamless transition from from a non-hybrid, like a fixed base configuration, to a hybrid or to a full cloud. Some clients skip the hybrid altogether and go full cloud, because why would you do the middleman? What I think is really important though is the ability to mix legacy and on-prem builds, but future-proof your DevOps operations. Because again, to your point earlier, whether roles are being consolidated, which is classic, because in the current economic climate, the current business climate, everyone's being asked to do more with less, right? It's the way the world always goes. We all have it in our business lives. You can go the other way as well, though. Like, as I say, I see clients who, through M&A, they suddenly have 4 or 5 people that have overflowing roles and responsibilities, but with different skill sets, like a Venn diagram with like many, many layers. And then it's the question of, okay, who does what and who's responsible for what? So having a cohesive strategy to go and adopt a CLS approach, I think is going to be key. It can be key and is key. And in the middle here, we're talking about the flexibility and scalability. So, we mentioned it earlier actually, but different cloud providers, we very much see Azure as the number one. And I think it's because it's Microsoft, there's no question. Google, I think, Rob, you mentioned at the beginning, or certainly in the previous session we had, where We see Google coming up. I mean, if you asked me 2-3 years ago, Google was like 4 or 5. It's definitely, in my view, number 2. Do you guys see the same?
Yeah, and I think it's more around be candid, a philosophy of a Microsoft shop and a
Yeah,
non-Microsoft shop.
yeah,
So I think when you hear Google, that typically is also a type of a customer that's leveraging things like Docker containers.
yeah,
They're delivering their installers in a completely different way to kind of
yeah.
avoid or bypass maybe having to put their product in the Windows Store or
Mm-hmm.
having to, make a call to a Microsoft build machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we do see that.
And they're a
But
bit more autonomous, right? Those kind of organizations, and they can be organizations within big organizations, right? Because that doesn't necessarily mean it's a small company. It might be a digital outfit within a big company.
yeah, or really they don't have a whole catalog of products. They might just
Mm,
have their 2 flagship products, and they really do have a installation author who's also the build master, who
yeah.
might also be the application developer.
I was going to say, yeah, that's the classic, right? I mean, that's how I
Yeah.
started my career, right? I was a C++ developer running some software, and I was tasked with evaluating installation products, right? There was InstallShield, there was the other one, right? The wise guys, okay? And well, there's no surprise for guessing how that ended. I chose InstallShield, and then 6 months later, ended up working for InstallShield. So, you know, but it was classic. It was, well, you're the developer, you must know how to write installers. Well, not really, but hey, let's give it a go. And and that still happens today. I think it really does.
Yeah, and I think it's the really that flexibility because
Yeah,
again, I don't know what you're seeing in your world as to the most common provider. We think it's Azure, but in practice, it's some just don't know, and they also don't want to make that decision.
I was
So
going to
when
say,
when you introduce that, they, you do what you need to do, and
yeah,
you pivot when you need to do it. If you acquire another company and you now have to use Azure or Google or whatever,
mm,
you don't need to repurchase new technology or things of that nature. So
yeah,
that's what we mean by the flexibility. And even more, when you have that flexibility, you increase your usage and you start to see where else could you take advantage of the functionality. And then it starts to really open the aperture on how you can take full advantage of the solution, which really helps other, how do you decide what products should I upgrade and move to a cloud, or which ones do I need to keep in a,
yeah.
hey, this is going to stay in its legacy mode. We're going to leave it
Well,
there.
there's so many influences, right? I mean, it'll be
Yeah.
cost, client importance, what the CTO wants to do, right? and joking aside, there are companies that we see, I'm sure you do, where there's just a preference, right? Um, Obviously, the Microsoft, non-Microsoft is classic, right? It's been there in IT for decades. I think the other important point would be to say that rarely do I see clients who are just one of those 3. They're usually a few of them, and at least 2 of them anyway.
So that actually has me thinking about another thing, Crispin, that probably is related is code signing. There's so many
Right.
different ways you can do the code signing that does it all standardize on the most current, or is some using the older stuff? You may not want to upgrade an old installer and
Mm,
take advantage of the latest code signing, support and functionality.
mm,
Other
mm,
products you might have to. There could be industry regulations that require this.
yeah.
So like how often are you seeing code signing between new technology and old technology and influencing customers and what they need to do?
Do you know what? It's an interesting question. So it's important for those for whom it's important, and for those who don't care about it, it doesn't even enter their radar. So it's it's that classic topic of it's always been a little bit of a pain to do,
Hmm.
right? Whether you've had a PFX file, you've embedded it in your installer, whether you've used an external certificate wrapper. Remember back in the days of the latest Windows versions when all the default settings, for example, in enterprise were it had to be signed, right? There was one point it had to be signed to be deployed,
Hmm.
and then we had Windows Defender, we had BitLocker, we have user access control, all those things that were just noise in front of us. We see, on that topic of security, we see the clients for whom that is important looking to almost try and do that in-house actually, build it into the app itself rather than do certificate wrapping. Because while certificate wrapping on the surface is straightforward enough, it's something else to manage. It's something else that expires. It's something else to track. So I think to the premise of optimization and usability, I think you're seeing it much, much less important than it used to be. There are different ways to manage that now, right? Okay. So let's move forward and have a look at some real world examples. I think, Rob, you guys are in the best position to do that. It's hand it up to you, right? Because you've got hundreds of thousands of customers using this stuff.
And I mean, as a very integral tool or solution to our customers, it's been around for 30 plus years.
Right.
So it's very, very wide and deep as to use cases, but kind of the most common ones we're seeing are where we want to kind of go all in, right? We don't want to have to manage a mix of on-premise or subscription and cloud and non-cloud. I don't want to deal with what products should I upgrade and what ones should I keep in an older version, right? Which might have security concerns, might have code signing limitations.
Yeah.
So this, for the first use case, it's a multinational power company in the U.S. And they wanted to really, some of their challenges, as we can see, right? They wanted to move away from outdated, unsupported licensing models, right? So that's tools that have met an end of life, no longer sold, no longer supported. If there's an enhancement or a security concern, those versions won't be fixed. Those will always be addressed in the most current version.
Mm-hmm.
So they felt that was some fairly severe risk in doing that. They knew they were going to be moving to a cloud environment to do their builds. They're already, like we said before, a Microsoft shop. They're all in on Azure. So this was almost an instant, wow, I can reduce a lot of my costs, my overhead already.
Yeah.
I'm already using that. Now I just need to figure out how do I involve my build process so that I can take advantage of everything. And that's kind of where I wouldn't say that was the crux of it, but the HSM code signing and Azure really was kind of a no-brainer that we're going to leverage this cloud license server. We're going to leverage the Microsoft support for the hosting of those build machines. So that's going to reduce a lot of costs, both on the physical machines, the maintenance, and then also now they know and they have a path to transition some of those older versions, those older projects. Should we upgrade those so that they are now in a state to where we can put them into a cloud build dev pipeline? Or should we actually sunset those products? And now is the time to make that decision. And again, full circle into a software development lifecycle and all the questions and all the situations that go into how do we make that decision. This was one of the biggest drivers, right? So they don't want to have the, let's call it a dual entitlement. They want users using only the current version, which has support, which has the ability, should there be a security concern, that will be addressed. And then, of course, to take advantage of their cloud provider that at this point is Azure. Knowing that they could switch at any point, that was also another huge key factor, because they did have some internal differences of opinion as to what's the best technology.
Right? Yeah.
So again, then you insert titles and who's who. So for now, they're going to be definitely leveraging the Azure solution, but there is a call it the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that this could change next quarter, next year, or even 3 years out. We want to be in a position to be able to take care of that. So ultimately, we were able to help them reduce their cost and the complexity of trying to manage both, but also the future proofing of, should something change in that part of your environment, InstallShield will not change.
Nice. And I think you've got another one, right? That's I think a different take. So this is a building industry company, this one?
Yeah, this was again another one where they in fact were not ready, right, to make that change. A lot of products. So kind of to your earlier point about many SKUs and things like that, managing via spreadsheets. So that in and of itself is creating a challenge. But there are over 100 lines and many variations. So they had some outdated software. They didn't really realize what versions had the limitations. So instead of patching something, they would be able to move to the more current release where that's fixed. And so that gives them back time from doing custom actions and doing things that maybe be not as natural.
Yeah.
So they also then needed that cloud agnostic, capability, because again, they've got products that are so many and so vast in terms of versions that are being used. How do I determine which ones I should upgrade just to a
Yeah.
more current release of
Yeah.
InstallShield? Which ones
Yeah.
should I put into my
Mm.
my automated DevOps build pipeline? Which ones can't? I have to use old code signing technology, and I
Yeah.
won't do that at build time
Yeah.
versus no, I want to do my build, I want to do the code signing all at that same time.
Yeah.
And so being able to have a mix of both of those solutions is really what made sense for them. It simplified the management of the license. They didn't need to worry about any kind of security or compliance concerns. And ultimately, having access to the most current version of InstallShield and those heritage versions for
Mhm.
instances where they will not ever take the time
Yeah.
from either a Q&A, R&D perspective to see, hey, what all, it's not just a simple upgrade the project. There could be a lot of other nuances and risks that they don't want to open by upgrading that project. So being
Sure.
able to just simply make the change in that version
Yeah.
is giving them that ability to be both, I guess you could say, cutting edge and
Mhm.
bleeding edge, because
Yeah.
you've got the both.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's like surgery, right? Make as much impact by doing as little as possible.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Well, then wrapping all those concepts together, I think, we can probably similarly summarize in terms of the best practices that we see from our side and your side. And I think, Rob, you'd probably agree with the concept of aligning their approach from the CLS approach into the business strategy, right? That's key. Because to your point earlier, if they're going against each other, it's not going to work, right? A balance. You said one of your use cases, the client wasn't interested in the legacy support, and one was.
Yep.
So depends on the business need. Client focus, I guess, actually similarly to balance. Those two things are kind of two halves of the same challenge, right?
Well, what I would add,
Yeah.
the balance is more of an internal development teams and technical methodologies and
Mhm.
viewpoints, whereas client focused is I might not have a choice. In order to sell to or to support my customers, I need to get current with what they need in their
Mhm.
environments. And then if they require us to deliver a package in a certain
Yeah.
format, then
Yeah.
I will either need to focus on my client's needs and provide that, or I'm at risk of churning that client and I no longer have them.
Yeah.
So I think there's a really key differentiator there
Well,
between
exactly. And
internal and you and your customers.
completely agree. But they're kind of two halves of the same sphere, right? Because
That's right.
the client's pulling you one way and the business is trying to balance that way, but actually you might want to go to full new project, but the client's telling you not to. So yeah, it's interesting. And then I guess overarching is this concept of developing a maturity in how you adopt that. So start that as a achievable objective with the highest need wherever that need is. Again, client focused, balance focused, and then allowing the technology to influence how quickly the cadence of that and what you include and exclude, I guess, would be a good summary.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the last point there with develop and the cloud licensing and requirements, right, and changes. This is just popping into my mind now as we're speaking that what if I want to take this internal? I don't want to use a third party cloud
Mhm.
provider. With the Revenant Cloud license server for InstallShield, you could host those build machines internally. So you
Yeah.
don't have to. And if something changes for whatever reasons, and you're no longer a Microsoft shop or you're acquired
Mhm.
by some other company that says we do things differently, you've got that ability to pivot and change on those requirements as they change, even if that means taking that hosting internally.
So it could be in a private cloud, right? I mean, in
Right.
another experiences, we worked with a couple of the big four, right? The big four companies here, PwC, Deloitte, those kind of guys. And they have their own cloud businesses within their business, right? It's called,
Hmm.
it's just, it's all it does. It's in Dublin, for example, in one of my clients' perspectives, and it's just as cloud hosting for the business. And that's exactly what they do. It's private cloud. It does all the same things, but it's privately run within the business. And so they might decide after some success in the public cloud that they bring it in-house, basically is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Amazing. Some great insights. I think we're probably going to leave it there. But Rob, we could talk all week as always. But,
Absolutely. I believe we'll drop a link for if there's questions, contact us. We'd love to engage on an individual level, or if there's industry specific or product specific questions, things like that. We'd be happy to engage further on a one-to-one situation if that makes sense for anyone.
Amazing. And brilliant. And it goes without saying that TLux is here to help, right? We help enable what Revenera writes. So it's a great partnership.
Absolutely, especially those cases where I've just inherited this project. I didn't create it originally. I have no clue what's in it. So I'm not aware of what type of risk might be in there. What type of, this expands to open source. I don't know what copyleft scripts could be in my projects. I don't want to deal with that. So some customers just are looking for someone to help them, a sanity check, maybe a health check on their installer, and what's the best practices to upgrade it, to take advantage of some of this more current technology. And I think that's definitely where TLux adds that value and can provide that guidance and path forward.
Right. Yeah. It's about knowing where not to go as well as where to go. Right.
Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know, and sometimes that's good, and other times that can be detrimental.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's always hard to fit so much in these shorter sessions, but I think we had a really great webinar there. So thank you to both of you, and thanks for everyone for joining.